Hey everybody, I wanted to share these papers with you before we get started on the tutorial. I've been going to be using The Beauty of Christmas designed by Kimmy Murray, and she has a shop on Etsy and also a Facebook page, so you can find her at Salty Beach Scrapper. I'll put a link to both um, her, and she also has a YouTube channel, so I'll put a link to her YouTube channel as well as her Etsy shop. Um, the YouTube channel, you can see her walkthrough of this physical paper, and then she also, on her Etsy shop, you can find this as well as the digital collection. So it's this, the digital is the same as this, it's just there's a few extras, like there's some journaling pages and or some note pages, there's some pockets and some tags. And so I'm going to be using both for my project. Uh, she asked me to design a project with her digital papers, but I'm actually going to be using both. So anyway, I did want to share this with you because I know that some sellers on Etsy print their papers at home and then sell it. That's not what this is. This paper collection was printed in a professional print shop. It is a durable, high quality paper, and so it's perfect for this project, and it's also perfect for Christmas cards. Um, I mean, it's just such a high quality, gorgeous paper. It has kind of a linen texture, but it's so smooth and soft at the same time. I love touching it. It's so nice. It's 8.5 by 8.5. I did purchase 2 packages of it. So this tutorial is going to be done a little bit differently. At this point, I don't know the end result, so you're going to be following along with me. Also, I'll have a cutting guide in the description box below for all of the chipboard and cardstock and design paper we'll be using for this portion of the tutorial. The tutorial will be broken up into about 3 or 4 parts, and as soon as I go through all of these lovely papers, then we'll go ahead and get started. Okay, so we're going to start off by making a box just like this. The only difference being is this one is a little bit deeper than the one that we're going to be making. So what I'm going to be doing is making it so we fold in the 2 sides and incorporate it on just one piece of paper. I thought it would be easier than piecing together all 4 sides. So what you're going to want to do is, and I've turned my scoreboard to the side, it's just easier for me to score a 1/2 inch because I'm right-handed. And so I'm going to score at a 1/2 inch. And that gives me the fold that goes on the top of the box. This part here needs to be a 1/2 inch. And then, so then I want to score at the depth of my box, which is 2 3/4 plus that 1/2 inch. So that would be 3 1/4. And so that's going to make one side of my box. Then I'm going to flip it to a 90-degree angle. And I'm going to do the same thing, score at a 1/2 inch. And then I'm going to score at 3 1/4. And like I said, all these dimensions will be in the description box below. Then you're going to need cut into your second 12 by 12 sheet of paper, and you're going to cut one piece of paper at 3 3/4 by 9 3/4, and then you're gonna cut a piece of paper that is 3 3/4 by 9 3/4, and then on these you're going to go ahead and score a 1/2 inch on each of the long sides. Okay, I'm having a hard time seeing hard. Hang on. There we go. And I'm going to flip that over and score on the other side. And then I'm going to score at, this is, oh, I'm sorry, this is the 9 3/4, 9 3/4 paper. So I've scored a 1/2 inch on each side, and now I'm going to score at 8 1/2. Okay. And this one, we're going to do the same thing. Let's see, this one actually is going to be a little bit different. We're going to score at a 1/2 inch on both sides again. And this is the 10 3/4 paper. And so what this 1/2 inch does is that gives us the 1/2 inch that we're going to fold onto the bottom of our box. And the 1/2 inch on the other side is this lip of the box here. So, and in between that would be the depth or the sides of our box. Now I'm going to score to make the flap, so I'm going to score at, let me just see, I can't see her. I'm going to score at 1 1/4, and then I'm going to score at 9 3/4. And you can, of course, you can turn your scoreboard over whichever way you want. It's just sometimes scoring that 1/2 inch is easier for me to turn it to the side. Okay, so what I want to do with this larger piece is when we scored that 1/2 inch, we have this little 1/2 inch strip here. So I'm going to cut that off up to these score lines here. So you'll see what as I'm doing it, you'll see. And I lost my sunlight. It's kind of a cloudy, dreary. We're actually having a winter day here. We've been having, we've had summer-like weather up until November. I mean, it was 80 degrees. So it was a mild summer weather temperatures. And then we've had a beautiful fall, hardly any wind. Temperatures in the, you know, well, for a long time it was in the 80s, and then we finally dropped down to the 70s, which was absolutely gorgeous. I mean, right, you can't ask for better weather than the 70s and sunshine. And then it was still cooling off at night finally, and then, but now just this week we're getting actual winter weather. So it's cloudy, and it has been raining a little bit, which it doesn't rain much here. Okay, so you can see I cut those strips off of that corner. Now what I want to do is I just want to cut one side. It really doesn't matter which side that you cut, but I'm going to cut that score line up to the other score line. Or if you prefer to cut this way, you can cut up to that score line. So it really doesn't matter. We're just making a flap. And then I'm going to, so I've just cut one side, and I'm going to just angle or miter those edges here. So this will be the little hinge or flap that's on either bottom or top of the box. That would be the top actually now. And then I'm just going to do the same thing with this one. I don't quite need the flap to be that much. I'm going to cut it down to about 1 1/4 inches. I mean, you don't have to measurement. It's just, you're just cutting off we don't need that much big of a flap, so, or hinge to put our box together. And I'm just going to angle that on the sides. You can see I didn't even cut it straight. I can straighten it up just so it doesn't, you know. For those of you who like things straighter, I'll cut it a little straighter. There we go. And then just doing the same thing here, just kind of miter those. You don't have to go all the way to that score line because sometimes it's better if you don't. You don't want that score line to rip. Okay, so now we have a piece that looks like this. And so I'm going to flip it over. I like to fold in on the ridge side of the score or the bump side. And so I'm going to, you know what, I forgot to grab my boom holder. Okay. Alrighty. So then I'm going to fold this little flap down, or hinge. So I've got to burnish this score line here. Excuse me. Oh my goodness. Yeah, with the wind also comes dust. I do live in the desert, whether it's summer or winter. When the wind blows, I inevitably start sneezing and coughing. So I'm gonna want my, how do I want to do this? Yeah, I want my hinges or my flaps to go on the outside because I want my box to have a smooth corner. I don't want these edges getting caught on the corners of the outside of my box. This will be covered up with design paper, so I'm not too worried about that. And I use glue for these kinds of projects. I just don't think the tape holds up. I know that some people say that their sticky doesn't stick in the humidity, but I live in a dry desert, so my tape, if it gets hot, which it does a lot here, then yeah, the tape just doesn't last, and the heat as well either. So, I mean, I do use tape for certain parts of my projects, but on this box, I'm going to use the liquid glue. Okay, so then we have like half of the sides of our box done and ready to go. And so now we need to put on, I'm going to take the longer piece and go ahead and burnish all your score lines. And this here, we just don't need the corners, so I'm going to cut those off. And I guess I could have cut that off before I folded it down, but oops. You know, I'm using these are not my best scissors. Hang on, let me see if I can find my little ones. That's better. Okay, and I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to miter all of these edges. So this will be what attaches to the side of our box, and then these are, one side is what's going to attach to the bottom of the box, and one side is going to be the little flap that's on the top of the box, and you'll see why I did that as we go along. Okay. Oops, I forgot. I don't know what I was thinking. I didn't cut this one off. I angled it. I didn't cut it off. Oh my goodness. Okay, like that. Okay, so I hope you saw what I was doing. Put the, hang on. Forgot to put the pin back on my glue. There we go. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to line up that score line here and make sure that everything is fitting. And it does seem to be fitting. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put glue on this bottom piece here. Like that. And I'm just going to burnish this down. Oops. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead and glue this flap down to the outside of my box. And you just want to make sure everything's lining up at a good 90-degree angle. Okay, like so. Sorry, you have to kind of flip that over. I'm going to burnish that down there. Okay, so then we have this side here. And then now we're going to set that aside for a minute. And you're just going to do the same thing. You're going to cut off these little corners here, these little rectangular corners. The only difference between this one is there's just one side that we need to do. And again, just mitering all of the edges of everything here. Okay, you know, the lighting sometimes I can't see, and so I didn't get that one on the score line. I cut it to the right, so I gotta cut that one again a little bit. Okay. And then this one, we're just doing those edges here. So I've made boxes using this system before with the chipboard inside. So this is how I made my my little file cabinet that I made a few months ago. Actually, it was quite a few months ago. It was in the spring. Oops, wrong way. So you want to make sure, right, that so this is going to attach to this one that doesn't have the flap, and then this one's going to attach to this one. Okay, so make sure you don't have both flaps on the same side. That would be wrong. You want it this way. And so I'm just going to make sure everything is working okay. And that seems to be good. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to put glue on the bottom. And then just do my best to line everything up. I always recommend that you watch my tutorials all the way through before you actually start, because if I do make a mistake, then you don't have to make the mistake with me. And then you know, if I do have any hints or tricks that help you along the way, you can know that before you've actually started your project. So now we're ready to put our chipboard pieces inside of the box. Okay, so I have cut 4 pieces of chipboard at 2 3/4 by 8 1/2. I'm going to be working with 2 of them to start off with. And so the first, and you're also going to need 4 pieces of cardstock cut to the same size. And you're going to want to glue the cardstock onto the chipboard before you start trimming, because it's just going to be easier to trim them both at the same time. But what you want to do is do a dry fit and make sure that it fits as close as you can to those edges, but you don't want to have that corner being pushed out, or else it'll weaken that corner if it's pushed out too far. And when I glue, I'm going to be pushing. I'm not going to worry too much about the sides right now, but I'm just going to be pushing that down to the bottom as far as I can. Okay, so I've cut these 2 pieces at 8 1/2 by 2 3/4, and the cardstock as well. Glued them on, but for sure these sides need to be trimmed down. We're going to lose about 1/4 of an inch because we have the other 2 chipboards on the other side. I don't like cutting it at 8 1/4 because when I need it to be just a little bit tight. I wanted the first 2 sides just to be right at those corners. but these need to just kind of really tightly slide in there. Um, and so there's a fine line between making the box bulge and having it just tight enough that you don't have too much of a seam on the corners. Um, so anyway, I'm going to trim these at a little bit over 8¼ and see how they fit, and we'll go from there. Okay, now I'm just going to do a dry fit, and so I don't know if you can see, this one's going to be perfect, I think. So it's going to fit, but it just kind of has to be pushed in a little bit, and I push it in and push it down on the sides, and just make sure it's not bulging the box, and it's not. But you can see now, well, hopefully, let me get something to, oh, this white does not like focusing. Come on, there we go. See, you don't even see the seam there on the corners, and that's why I make it just a little bit tight. And I probably went over, around 1/8 of an inch maybe. It's just one of those things you're just going to have to work with, and just try to cut a little at a time. All right, so the final piece is fitting nice and snug against the corners and the edges. There's hardly any seam there, and so I'm going to slide that in and glue it down, and then all my chipboard pieces will be in. And so now we have our box, and so now we have these little lips on the side here, and I'm just going to start folding those down over the other chipboard pieces. And you got like a little 1/8 of an inch there where the chipboard is, so I like to fold that over and give that a little edge there first, and then go ahead and start in the middle and just keep pressing down and in. And then go to the ends. Now your ends are going to be kind of funky sometimes, like there's going to be, it kind of goes over on the other side. That's okay, that's just the way it's going to be, unless you want a gap there, and you really don't. So I think it's because the box is just slightly crooked on one side, like about 1/16 of an inch. I'm going to go ahead and give my paper some memory. So my glue is drying really quick and I have a hard time getting it down. So give it some paper memory there, fold memory. And then I'm going to go ahead and add my glue. So I hope you guys can see what I'm doing, and the corners on this are actually coming together really nice on those top corners. You know, you have to have a little bit of pressing down on there. You're going to have a little bit of a fold line there, but that's okay. I think it's actually coming together really nice on the top. I don't know if I got enough glue on this one. Maybe I just needed to burnish it down more. Okay. Yay, we have a box finished. I have to, at this point, I have to make a decision on, hang on, let me turn that off. That was my morning alarm. I got it way before I usually normally get up. I'm going to go ahead and make some decisions now on how to cover this with the design paper. And then also we need to make our book cover, but I think that let's go ahead and finish this off before I'm trying to decide which would be better. Like I said, you're following along with me. I haven't figured this totally out yet. I'm trying to decide if it'd be easier to mount this before I put the little insert pieces in, which I think it's going to be. I'm going to want to burnish on the bottom here. It's going to make it harder placing the inside pieces in though. I'll think about it and I'll be back. All right, so I've decided the next best step is to cover the sides of my box with design paper. So I've decided to use this paper here, and I'm going to take advantage of these lanterns across the top because I think that'll look nice on the sides of my box. And so these are about 3 inches long, and so I'm going to cut this at 3 inches, and then I'll trim the excess off to make that 2 3/4. I'll trim that from the top. And then the remaining paper would be 5 1/2, and so that will be enough to cut in half and make 2 3/4 strips. And I'm going to use the opposite side, and then that will fit on the inside of my box. And the paper is going to have to be trimmed just a little bit on the side. Just it's just overlapping just a little bit, so I'm going to have to trim that. So I'm going to go ahead and do all these pieces, and you'll notice that I'm not really leaving much white or an offset on that. It's okay if a little bit of white is showing. That's not going to bother me. But I decided I didn't want an offset like that. I decided I'd go ahead and fit it as close as I can to the edge. Anyways, let me go cut these pieces and I'll put them on and I'll be back. Okay, you can see that I now have my design paper glued onto the sides of my box, but I do want to explain a couple things before we move on. I decided to put a piece of chipboard and on the bottom because I just really didn't like the gaps there. I just thought they were too big and it needed to be tighter, especially if you have little things in your box. You don't want them getting caught there or trapped in that little gap. So what I did is I cut a piece of chipboard, a thinner chipboard than this medium weight, and I attached the cardstock to it and stuck it in there. I put glue on the bottom of the box first and then shoved it in there. So I did cut it very tight. Too tight and it's going to really bow your box and it's going to fold up. And again, there's a fine line between too tight and not tight enough. So, but I did slide that in there and I pushed down with my bone folder and got those edges really nice and tight so that there's hardly any seam there on the bottom at all. But it did take up some space, and so I had to cut my side pieces a little bit shorter. Plus, I didn't want them going all the way to the top of the box. So my side pieces are 2 5/8. And so anyway, you can see that I did butt them in the corners so that there's no space. And my box is slightly crooked on one side, and so the paper does not go all the way down to the bottom along these edges right here. And so I've decided that's where I'm going to put my little short divider. This divider is going to go right here like that. Okay, and we'll talk about that in just a second. First of all, on the outside, I did have a bit of an accident with my glue bottle, and so I lost a little bit of the design paper right here. And so what I ended up doing is while the paper was still damp, I went along with my gummy eraser here and just kind of rubbed across the top, not too hard, um, and just stressed the paper a little bit. And I went along the sides and the bottom, and I did that as the paper was just slightly damp still from gluing it on, just to make it consistent all the way around. Um, so it has kind of a little bit of that shadow effect or that fading effect there in places on the bottom and the top, and then I did these edges here on the sides too. So yeah, just improvising for a mistake or an accident and that. So okay, now we'll get onto the divider, and I'm not actually going to glue these in, but I'll show you how to make them. I don't want them as tall as the box, so I've cut these at 2.5 inches, and then I started at 8.5. You know, you could measure and find a starting point, but you want it to be wider than the inside of the box. You just want to cut a little as you go and make sure that it's tight. And so you can see that one is going to fit pretty nicely in there. I'm not really seeing any of too much. Actually, I'm not really seeing any of a gap. That one is just about perfect. So all of the divider pieces I ended up cutting down to 2.25. I just thought they were a little too tall in the box and wanted them a little bit shorter. And so the middle piece I started at 8.5 also, and just trimmed a little off the edge until I got a nice tight fit in there. And even though it looks like it's bowing a little bit, once I straighten it with my fingers there, you can see that it'll go straight. Now, if you're holding it like that and it still buckles like that, then you know it's too tight. And then the final piece is cut at 4 1/8 by 2 1/4, and it's going to set approximately there. I'll give you the exact measurements to place those divider pieces once we get the decorated or design paper on those. And but it's just going to be pressed in between the edge of the box and that middle divider piece. So I'll go ahead and show you how to cover these with the design paper, and we'll go from there. So for the dividers, I've decided to use this polka dot paper, and for the long pieces I cut 6.5 inches from the right edge, and so I will not be using that 2-inch strip, so I'm just going to set that aside. So my paper is 8.5 inches by 6.5 now, and my chipboard is just a little bit less than 8.5, and so I'm marking a little line there so I know where to trim off that excess. And you can't see that I'm doing that on camera. I got a little bit out of frame there, but I just trimmed a little bit of excess off the bottom, and then on excuse me, one of the 8.5-inch sides, and I'm just clearing the paper away right there. One of the 8.5-inch sides, I just mark an inch top and bottom, just so I can line up that chipboard and glue it onto the back of the polka dot paper. Okay, so now I'm going to take my bone folder and just kind of run along that edge there, just as a guideline, and I'm going to fold the paper back this way. And so I have that fold there, and then I'm going to, whoops, stuck to my scissors. I'm going to miter those edges there just slightly. And then you're going to just press your chipboard against the table and gently fold your paper over the other side of the chipboard. and then go ahead and burnish that down. Maybe run along the edge of the chipboard there. And then you're going to do the same thing to the other side. Just going to run your bone folder along that chipboard there. And I'm not getting it lined up right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this down first. I think it's going to be easier to glue the other side down to the chipboard. I could be more aggressive and get that fold there, but I don't want to rip the paper. So I'm going to press this chipboard piece against the edge of the table and just slightly run my bone folder right here, and I'm going to just keep folding up to a 90-degree angle from the table. All right, I don't want to crease it too much because I don't really want that to be weakened and rip. That's what's going to hold our divider into the box. These tabs on the side. Okay, and so I'm just going to miter these edges as well. Okay, so there is my first divider. Okay, so you're going to duplicate that process with the same design paper and make your second divider. And then the third one, you're going to cut a piece of the third polka dot paper. Remember, I had two of the paper collections, and you're going to cut this one at 4 1/8, and then you need the same length to cover the sides, and so that would be 6 1/2. So 4 1/8 by 6 1/2, and you're going to use the exact same process to cover this small one as well. So this is how I want my dividers to set in the box, and so I'm going to measure from the inside edge 6 1/8 of an inch, and I'm just going to mark that right here with my pencil, and then I'll know that's where I want this to set. But I have to glue in the middle piece first and then set this one on top of it. So I'm just going to do this for now so that I can know where to mark this divider, because I want this one to be pressed tightly in between the divider and the edge of the box. So as I'm pressing, I want to make sure that I'm not pressing in so that it's angled like that, or pressing so hard that it's angled like that. So just keep that in mind. And so you know, just give me a minute and I'm going to line everything up and mark it where I need to be. Okay, and then this one I don't need to mark. I'm just going to take this edge here and butt it up against the edge of the box. And my box is a little bit crooked on this corner or a little uneven, and so I will adjust that when I get ready to glue everything down. And then also I'm going to place the dividers so that this little design that's showing right here will be on the top, and that this one will be on the opposite side. Not that it really matters, but that's what I'm going to do. And then also, as I'm gluing everything down, I want to make sure that I have 3 1/8 inch in between this divider and this divider. And this one's going to be about 4 1/8 by 6 1/8. And of course, this one will be 4 1/8 by, really doesn't matter, but it's going to be about 2 1/8. So, all right, so this concludes part 1 of the tutorial. Part 2 will be working on the book cover. And so I will see you for that one. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, I would so appreciate a thumbs up. And don't forget to subscribe so you'll be notified for my upcoming videos and tutorials. Thanks again for watching. Bye.